So I am going to show you how to fold the paper on a small sheet, because the large sheet's going to be awkward and I want you to understand really well how you're creating the journal. Now, you wouldn't use a piece of paper this small to carry around a journal with you unless you were, I don't know, keeping notes in it or something. But anyway, so what I like to do is start from the longest side first. It keeps me in check on keeping the journal straight, and it's a big deal to keep the edges straight. So what I do is I just simply fold it over. It's a lot harder when you're doing a big sheet of paper, but I really concentrate on this edge over here. And I like to, you'll probably find yourself coming up with your own way of doing it, but I like to start in the middle and fold to one side and the other side. And it's going to be a lot harder on a large sheet of paper. So this is where your bone folder will come in handy, or your scissors will work fine, or a wooden spoon also works well. So basically that's your first fold. And this is going to make an awfully small book. On this paper, since it's a really stiff, small sheet, I folded it over again just because I wanted to make sure that it folded well. So then I like to do the second fold, which is, this is going to be tricky with this little sheet of paper. But basically you're lining it up in the middle. You're meeting your first fold. And when I'm doing a big sheet of paper, I actually fold into it like this. I should probably try it. And then I hold this edge up and knead it. And then I start in the middle. Actually, the little one's a lot harder than the large one. I thought it was going to be easier. Okay. So then you're going to do the same with this side. And this is, on this sheet of paper, it's going against the grain to fold the long way in. All paper has like a grain to it, and if you're following the grain, it's easier to fold. If you're against the grain, it's harder to fold. And Fabriano, I say that wrong, and I'm so sorry. Fabriano doesn't seem to have the same problems against the grain as other paper. So there you have your first fold. And now you're going to fold it on the short side. And this makes it easier because you kind of line up these little, the fold lines that you've already, the creases that you've already put in there, you line up again. And try to get this as perfect as you can. It will make your sketchbook that much better looking. So you can see how already you're creasing that edge, and the tape is going to reinforce that edge, especially if you have paper that is thinner. And I started making these books with 140-pound paper, and it's just really hard to crease that paper. So I ended up going to 90-pound. And it's a much easier to manipulate that. And it's still a very heavy paper. It's probably at least as heavy as cardstock. Alright, so that's what we have. Basically, we have a whole page with crease lines on it. So, the trick to the book, this is a big, huge trick. If you want a book that's horizontal, basically the pages are this way. They're longer on the top, shorter on the side. Then you're going to have to cut this way. And you don't cut all the way through. You just, let me mark it so you see here. So if you want a horizontal book, you're going to cut, you're going to stop here, and you're not going to cut like with a scissor. I'm going to show you how to do that. And then you're going, it ends up being a zigzag or an S, well, a W or an M where you're cutting. And I'll do a little diagram for you so you'll have that. And you want the outside ones to match. So I'm going to be tearing the page on the outsides, on the end, and then in the middle I'm going to be tearing that way. That's if you want horizontal. If you want vertical, which is actually what I prefer most of the time, you do the same thing, but you go up the shorter edge. So horizontal is the longer edge, and vertical is the shorter edge. And that'll make sense to you. So right now I have to go get some water. So you do not have to draw down the lines. I was drawing down the lines to show you where you were going to cut things. So remember, we're only going to be tearing the paper from on the two ends. We're going to leave this dry and wet this area, and then we're going to rip that. And then we're going to leave this dry and wet this area and rip that. And I forgot to put this in the description, but you're going to need a little sponge. You can lick the page, but it's an awful lot of licking paper. So, and if you're going to give it as a gift, that's kind of gross. So anyway, so I just get a sponge, I dip it in a little bit of water, and I am really mindful of leaving this. I'm gonna flip this over. I'm gonna wet only the bottom part, and I usually only have to do like 2 or 3 swipes of water, and then I lay it down. And for me, it's easier to pull towards myself. So that's when the straight edge comes in. After I've wet it, I lay it down and I pull the paper towards me. And you gotta be really careful at the end here to stop. So right when you get to the end, you stop. So that's your first tear. You're gonna do the same end here. So you're going to get it wet. Careful not to get this wet. Just the end 3. You're going to lay it down. And the tearing is much more difficult when you have a large piece of paper. So this also gives you, on watercolor paper, actually on this paper too, it gives you kind of a deckled edge, which I like. You can use an X-Acto. It gets harder when you use a large sheet to use an X-Acto. So now we have to be mindful of this page cannot match the other pages. So this has to look like a W. So this has to stay not wet or not torn. So be careful not to get it wet and not to tear it. And I usually go down 3 or 4 times down the page. And I'm going to turn this around just because I rip better towards, I have a problem ripping away from me. I tend to tear the paper really badly. So I did flip it over. And this is a little tricky too because you don't want to rip this way because you could rip that. So be really careful not to rip that. And usually I rip the first part and then I put my hand under and rip the rest of the way. So there you have your, this way it's an M, this way it's a W. And then now you're going to fold your book. And this one, it doesn't really matter how you fold it as long as you zigzag. So if you go forward with the first one, you go back on itself, forward, back on itself, forward, back on itself, forward, back on itself, under, back, under, back, under, back, under. And there you have your little tiny book. And it gets a little strung out at this stage because this is really heavy paper with a little sheet, with a small sheet, so it doesn't want to stay down at all. Anyway, so let's do that folding again. It kind of naturally does it on its own. So, plus if you make your book once, you can make it out of any kind of paper. So you'll practice the folding on this and then move to your bigger sheet. So you want to go upper, lower, 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 upper. And there you have it. So now we need to fold the larger sheet. Here we're going to start. I'm starting with the long edge. I am folding the long edge to long edge. And this is going to be, I unfortunately cannot show you perfectly at an angle that I do this. So it's going to be above. Just remember to keep your edges straight. This first fold is the hardest, and you want to start from the middle. And then pick a side while kind of holding this down with your other hand and roll the edge. Then I always kind of check it to see if it worked. Your first one probably won't be perfectly folded. If it is, you're a rock star. You're a rock star anyway, but I think the first 3 or 4 that I did after remembering how to do this journal, they were actually sort of crooked. And if I can find one, I'll show you. Okay, so make sure that edge is really going, you go over it with your bone folder. So you have a really nice, tight edge on that side. Okay, so now this is kind of tricky. You're going to fold the long end to the middle. And I like to hold the paper up. This is always awkward. I'm not going to fold the paper up. And get that edge. You can see the edge because it's been folded. So just make sure that you're on that edge. Make sure that that it lines up over here. Try to get it perfectly on that line. This doesn't look like it makes a 6x9 journal, but it does. Okay. So we have this short edge. And we'll do the other side. You know, you can make a really nice, just, they have some really pretty colored paper by Canson. You can make really nice sketchbooks using your favorite color. I like to watercolor. That's one reason I chose the watercolor paper, but you know, if you like to sketch, there are so many options. Okay, so now we have all the folds in the long end, and we're going to fold the short end, which is a little bit easier because you can line up your folded edges. And this particular paper is deckled on the edge, and that's why tearing it is kind of nice. And I hate to say this, but my journal is very off. Wowza. I was not a good folder. Well, this particular journal is not going to be perfect. But yours can be. So that first fold is hard. Wow, that's really off. It's off by a good 1/8 of an inch. Okay. It still works if it's off a little bit. I mean, the tape kind of hides a little bit, but usually I like to be a little bit closer than 1/8 of an inch off, but you'll see what it looks like to be off. Okay, so you fold that edge. So we're almost there. 2 more folds. Two more folds until you see how I failed. It is tricky. You're going to have to get the hang of it. I suppose if you really had OCD, you could measure it, but I tried it once just measuring it, and some of this paper isn't exactly square. Not all the time, but some of the times the sheets aren't perfectly square. Probably has to do with how they dry, actually, because they make the paper and then I don't know if they cut it before it's totally dry or not. I don't know these things. But anyway, I would think that paper could move a little in manufacturing. Alright, so this last one, it gets a little easier on the short edge. Breathing a sigh of relief. Okay, so we have all of our edges folded nice and crisp with our bone folder, and this is when you decide whether you want it horizontally or vertically. And I usually do mine so that the book reads vertically. So keeping to that, and remember you're going in the M or the W shape. And I can't, there's one of the books that I did over here that I actually messed up, and it wasn't, I actually cut all the bottom edges, or anyway, so I'm going to wet the top edge here. And sometimes if it's a thicker paper, like if you're doing 140 pound, you could simply turn it over, fold it, and wet that side, because 140 pound paper is quite a bit heavier, and you want to make sure that's wet really well. Okay. Then we're going to get our straight edge. And carefully, it would be easier if you had a straight edge that would go all the way down the end. And for that, you probably need about a 18 to 20 inch ruler. I only have a 15 inch here, so now we're gonna, this paper also, you can kind of pull it apart instead of ripping up in the air. Your preference. See how easy it is to cut after it's been wet that well? So you want to stop at that end, and there you have the first tear. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do the middle. I'm doing it a little bit differently than I did the other book. I'm not one to follow an exact plan, sorry. One of those horrible people. Okay. I constantly have to tell myself that I need to do this in a W or an M shape so that I don't mess it up. If you do mess it up, you just go ahead and tear it right across the middle and make two small journals. This journal will make a 36, this one sheet of paper will make a 36-page journal. And because it's thick, you will be able to do, it does front and back. So that's really cool. It's 36 pages when it's front and back. Okay. Ta-da! Last one now. See, if, you know, it's a quick journal, doesn't require a whole lot of tools. When I was in art school, we just used a scissor to cut it, but I think it looks a lot better if you tear it, because it actually, to me, stays straighter. I guess I'm not very good with a scissor, sadly. I don't even have the journal from my college days. I just have the notes that I took on creating the journal. Okay, it gets a little awkward manipulating the already cut paper, so just be careful that you don't rip anything at this point. I just folded it up there so it wouldn't rip. Okay. And somebody told me that Tim Holtz has a book of, I don't know what it is called, but it's also a lot like this. I think this type of book has been around for a long time. I mean, the teacher that taught me was in his 50s, so. Okay, so now we're going to start folding it up. And it kind of already is ready to fold on its own. So down, up, down, up. Hold on. see, if you fold into yourself, you create this, and that's, you're gonna know that's, you're doing it wrong. I'm just showing you that, wait a minute, that's wrong. So you know you have to go down, and then your pages work. Because your pages have to open up. So basically, you fold to the back side, to the front side, to the back side, to the front side. And if you remember that, your fold will go well. Okay, let's see how bad I did with my lining up. Okay, so do you see this little edge here? That's where I was off 1/8 of an inch. It's not horrible. Looks okay from this side. Doesn't look as good from the other side. So I would use that as the bottom of my journal, just so you don't like notice it when you look at it very well. And now you can go back over each individual page with your bone folder if you wish. But see how that stays down much better than your little book did. But that was your little book. It's kind of like a slinky. That just dated myself. Okay, so it's not quite 6. It's 5.5 by 7.5. I said 6 by 9, so I kind of messed that up. But anyway, it's 5.5 by 7.5. I love this size of journal. It's perfect to put in your purse. I will also show you how to make the closure. So next we are going to be taping the edges.